Good morning and happy Sunday. Welcome to Sunday. I'm so glad to be here, and I'm so glad that you are too. I love my intro. For those of you that haven't heard it, and even if you had, I love being reminded of it. I say, I'm so glad to be here, touches right on the heart of this message that I want to share this morning, where we're either consciously living or we're unconsciously preparing to die. And so when I say, I'm so glad to be here, it's my way of claiming over and over, I am consciously choosing to live. I am consciously embracing life. And therefore, I am no longer consciously or unconsciously choosing progressing towards death. It's an unknowing decision, of course, to be preparing to die for most people. And then for some, it's a very conscious decision that their life is a preparation for death. So I'm jumping right in, which I love, to jump right into the good stuff. I want to thank those of you that are here with me and those of you that are watching on replay. Whether you're joining live or you're watching on replay, I would love to hear any of your insights, any of the parts of this that really resonate with you, anything that's really different. And feel free to drop a comment or an emoji that expresses how you're feeling as you're listening to the message. All right, so let's get started. I put the title on here to live as much today, live like you might die tomorrow, which really means get the most out of your day, live to the fullest today, while at the same time, because you might die tomorrow, right? But at the same time, prepare to live like you might live to 105. And here's an interesting thing. I wrote a post earlier this week sharing a little bit of my own personal story that I, unbeknownst to myself, so unconsciously, was preparing to die for really the first half of my life. And I think about half of my life as being the years that I lived up till 40, just about 40, and I didn't know it, right? And so that's why this topic is so near and dear to my heart, is that even those of us that are doing our very best, that are putting in our best effort to live, oftentimes we were trained and conditioned to prepare to die. And so we just naturally, unconsciously follow suit. And so that's why my heart loves to say, I'm so glad to be here, because again, it's my conscious statement to myself, as much to myself as it is to you, that I am grateful, truly grateful, fully grateful to be here, right? Because we can talk about gratitude, and I'm not going to dive off onto this subject today, although it's tempting. We can say that we're grateful to be here, but unless we're living our life representing our gratitude to be here, it's really just something we know intellectually that we should be grateful, right? Even in the statement, we should be grateful. But shoulding to be grateful isn't really embodying gratitude. So when you're able to say, I'm so glad to be here, it's a representation of your being fully engaged, fully invested in living. Versus this concept that I've been discovering and honing over the many, many years. It's fascinated me for a long time, both because it touched me personally and also because in my work in the first 20 years as a therapist, I was regularly engaging with people who were not fully invested in living, and in fact were greatly suffering, desiring to live, and yet really representing a slow, painful death. And many of them were actually very conscious of living this way. I've had the privilege of working with all sorts of different people at all varying stages of desire to live. And so I've talked with hundreds of people who were really struggling to live at the core, at like it was the main thing that was on their minds. And I too had a period of time where, well, let me even say, retract that and say I've had multiple periods of time, short increments of time over the 20 years between 20 and 40 something, 40, where I've questioned living and my desire to be living. And so I know that if someone who's raised in a really, typically amazing home, we'll say just sort of more than average, again, I hate to compare in that way, but other people would say it's more than average, and loving home with amazing parents and have the opportunity to go on to get great education and live a pretty good life, that I could get to the point and have multiple points over those 20 years where I questioned my own desire to live. I know that this message is so important for me to share. And it is like one of the main messages that I feel compelled to share, because I suffered a lot of those periods of time by myself. I chose, right, to not share, to not talk about it. I didn't know who to talk about them with, and how to say that kind of thing out loud. And we'll just say in my upbringing, we just didn't talk about those things. And we certainly didn't talk about them in this kind of forum, right? So I feel even more privileged to be able to be here this morning, loving my life and being able to share my experience with you. So I am truly honored. I mean that truly. As I get a little even emotional saying it, I am truly honored to be here with you and to share my story and to share time with you. And I'm very grateful, truly grateful that you're here with me. So circling back, what does it really mean? I think it's important to really talk about this concept of you're either living or you're dying. And I just kind of say it that way to summarize. I've already explained what I really mean here. It's this essence, the living with this mindset of death is imminent, death is on its way, death is up ahead, and or if you grew up with a faith or a religion that taught you the better life was after you die, right? And so any of those streams of thought, and just as a culture, we very, very, very much, you don't have to grow up in any kind of religious household or faith to believe and prepare for the inevitable, prepare for death, prepare for the end of life, that's very much a cultural thing that we're taught, is to really spend a lot of time and effort and ultimately anxiety and worry preparing for what might happen in the future. And that goes into 1,000 different directions, and we have all kinds of like systems and institutions to actually help us prepare for the end. And while I'm speaking right there, right, there's actually a lot less institutions and systems to help us live our very best life, which is really an interesting thing, just a side note, think about, right? How many systems, and again, I'm speaking in this moment, sort of off the cuff here, feeling this revelation even in my own mind right now, so bear with me. If you can think of things, systems that are really cultivated, especially in our early childhood, throughout school, college, into our 30s, that are really intentionally there to help us live our very best life, to physically, emotionally, relationally live fully, drop it into the chat. When I'm just speaking here off the cuff in this moment, having this revelation, they aren't coming to my mind. And so even times when we talk about things in childhood, like, oh, what do you want to be when you grow up? It isn't from a childlike wonder that we speak and parents speak into us around, oh, what would you love to be when you grow up, right? No. Most of the time it's like, yes, what would you like to be when you grow up? And there's some like imagination and excitement around it. But very soon into adolescence, it becomes what's practical, what makes sense for, again, preparing for the future. So that being said, right, I'm looking at it really globally, this essence of you're either living fully, right, desiring to live and fully present in your living, or you're really sort of doing this very interesting slow death. And so I think about all of the ways that this impacts us, right? So we come up on 100 decisions. I'm just going to say 100. It's really like in the thousands of number of decisions that we make in the course of a day. But let's like consciously think about, we probably make, I don't know, 100 that we could consciously like sit down and make a list of all the decisions that we make inside of the course of a day. And in each of those decisions, there is an essence of choosing life or preparing for death, right? And so even in something super small, I was thinking quite a lot about this morning. And as I was going through my morning routine, it's like, even in the decision to take a shower, right? As basic as that can sound, right? Again, I take all my experience of working with people alongside of myself. There's actually a lot of people that struggle to take a shower in the morning, right? There's a lot of people that struggle to flutter their eyes open in the morning. And so I was just thinking about things in the most basic childlike form that we can, because it's so much easier to think about life in the basic childlike form than in all of the complexities that we add to it as adults. And so I was just thinking, as basic as taking a shower and brushing your teeth and flossing, right? All of those actions are representational of living life at your fullest, right? Because you're literally consciously preparing to have the very best teeth that you can for the longest possible span of your life. Versus an unconscious, typically it's an unconscious, but sometimes it's conscious. I've gone back and forth with this flossing thing, which I won't speak on too long, although I could get very passionate about flossing. I fortunately had a hygienist at a time when we were, she was measuring the millimeters that you could go into your gums, and she was loving her life and loving her job, and I was blessed to have her working on my teeth. And she was like, listen, we need to have a serious conversation for you to really understand what happens when you don't floss. And she proceeded to get out like charts and graphs to help me like understand what happened, not graphs, but like visual aids to help me understand what would happen over the ages of my lifespan if I didn't invest in my own teeth. And for her, the most important thing was my flossing. Because she invested in me at that level, I now floss every single day, no matter what, because she invested in me and helped me understand if I wanted to have amazing teeth, I would have to floss to be able to have them forever. Like the most amazing teeth, the best chance at having really amazing teeth. And so I was really just sort of chuckling to myself, wow, this like big global picture of you're either choosing to live or you're slowly preparing to die, right? Or you're just choosing to die. And I say it like in a slow kind of a way because we're not hand deciding we want to die, but we're choosing all these little decisions that either support life or descent. And so right there, even in the flossing of the teeth, and 1,000 choices that come really in our day-to-day life. And so if you think about it bigger scale, it impacts the way you do your work, the type of work that you do. It affects your relationships. It affects your outlook on life. It affects your decisions, whether or not to exercise, whether or not to decide to do the things you really enjoy doing, right? Most of us have been trained and conditioned to put those things off until later, right? And it's interesting, right? Because it's a very conflicted teaching that we get of like, put it off till later when you have like your retirement and your free time. But at the same time, it's also like work really hard right now. And we also consciously know that if we're putting all this effort and hard work and labor and stress into now, it's going to be very hard to really enjoy the things that we want to enjoy later in life. And so as we get taught these things, right, the people teaching them to us are also very conflicted. And I think it's important to call that out because for a hot minute, I held a lot of like negative feelings towards the culture and my upbringing that I wasn't taught all of these things. And now I feel very free. I was going to say completely free, but let me not make that kind of assumption and just say I feel very free and there's no more blame inside of me. There's no more like resentment for not having learned these things because the reality is My family, my parents did their absolute best and did an amazing job with me. And there's no way that anyone's parents, your parents, could teach you all of the things that there are to know. So let me just put that, disclaimer in there to alleviate that energy, your precious energy, to even go down that path. So we make all of these decisions that tie into our decision, our life, our energy going towards furthering our desire to live and our true essence living, right? Feeling fully invested in life, or we're having this mindset, this bigger picture that, again, most of us are not conscious of. We're really just like going along with what we understand the world to be and going along with all the things that we've been taught, and unconsciously choosing to shortcut a lot of things that we really need to invest in order to live a long and fulfilling, exciting life. Okay? Compelling, inspiring is one of the ways I describe it now. It's like, if your life isn't really inspiring, of course you're going to have a hard time waking up in the morning. When my life, previously to about 38, wasn't inspiring, you better believe there were a lot of moments I had a hard time getting out of bed. And I would hit that freaking snooze button multiple times over. Now I understand and can look back and be like, oh, that's because I really wasn't inspired by my life. Even though, again, I had a lot of like great things going on in my life, I wasn't deeply inspired by my own life. And bigger picture, and so much more importantly, I wasn't inspired by the future, by my outlook on the future. Okay? And so if you're not inspired by your outlook on the future, then of course that's going to impact every single thing that you do, and the way in which you make decisions, and the things that you choose to do in the course of a single day, in the course of a week, a month, a year. And it's really from this space of, let me survive, let me do the things that I really have to do, should do, to maintain and continue to get through life, okay? Which again, felt like for me personally, and in the handful, of people that I've, well, not handful, but large handful of people that I've worked with and or just had the honor to have great conversation with over the years, it's not the way that anybody wants to live their life. That essence of surviving the day, right? Going through the emotions. I mean, I've heard it described to me in so many different ways, feeling robotic, feeling like they're on autopilot, of course, the classic hamster wheel. That's not a desire that any human actually has, to be able to live. So my thoughts around why we're living that way, again, that big picture outlook, it's what you were taught. It's what you were conditioned to see, and what you were not conditioned to see, which is this alternative way, right? That life is meant to be created such that you are deeply inspired and fulfilled by it, right? Even as you hear me say that, like, what comes up in your body? I know in my previous life, I used to hear the word fulfilled, and I would be like, ugh. Right? Like, I would literally have a visceral response when I would hear the word fulfillment. Even at the onset of my shift into coaching around 38, 39, 40, I would think about this word fulfillment and be like, ugh, I'm not using that ever in any of my content. Well, you know what they say about don't say never. God has a beautiful sense of humor about bringing those things around for you to be like, second time to consider. And now I say that word regularly and without thought, fulfillment, because again, it's the same thing to say you feel deeply inspired by your life. The other really, really big reason I think that we live this slow death, this mundane lifestyle, this surviving the day lifestyle, is because we haven't fully cultivated, just scrolling down to stick to my notes here, or some of them will say, we haven't fully cultivated a true, authentic, meaningful, concept of ourselves. I just said a mouthful, so I'm going to let that settle. I know for me, I made it all the way to 38. Again, super accomplished, right? I was the clinical director of a treatment center, 150-bed treatment center, supervising multiple therapists and running all kinds of systems and operations, owned my own house, all the things. And I still didn't fully develop my own concept of myself. I wasn't able to fully say I was very accomplished. So mind-blowing, really. And so many like amazing professionals that I speak to now, where they the same are not able to claim the amazing amounts of accomplishments, achievements, and wins. They're not able to say like they're crushing it in life. Why? For this very same reason, because they haven't fully separated to have their own self-concept, ultimately from their childhood, from their parents, from the concept that others have held for them, that others have held on behalf of them, right? And so even at 38, which is really kind of funny, I haven't said this exact sentence out loud, so you're hearing it for the first time, this one sentence, it's this concept, like even at 38, I didn't have a full understanding of who I was. I didn't have my own concept of myself. And the concept that I did have of myself had a lot of unfavorable parts to it. Right? So like, I want to like keep the balance and display like a certain amount of balance in the ways that I would have thought about myself. So just some snippets without going into too much detail. Like I had a lot of good things to say about myself. But I also had a lot of not so good things to say about myself. And I also had this like constant voice going on inside of my head, my voice, that was berating quite often of myself. And all of the things, right? I would engage in a situation and then afterwards I would obsessively think about it and replay it and call myself out on it and sometimes call myself names that were really very unattractive that I wouldn't call another human. So I share that with you to be able to recognize I had not yet fully cultivated a healthy concept, a healthy view of myself, an honoring view of myself. And so without an honoring view, an individuated view, in other words, separating yourself from all the other people and all of their views of you, without that healthy view of yourself, of course you're going to struggle to think well of yourself, and you're going to struggle to claim all of your wins, and you're going to struggle to claim the amazing gifts and talents that you possess that only you can give and contribute to the world. Yeah, you're going to struggle with that because there's going to be these other lenses that you're looking at yourself through, and there's also going to be these like other lenses of I'm not there yet, I'm not good enough, I haven't achieved, I haven't arrived, that are ultimately going to hold you back from being the actual best version of yourself. So we hold on to these other views simply because that's, again, how we're trained and conditioned, right? And more, as we see happening, we're staying more attached to our parents in a needing kind of a way, right? And that's been going on for a hot minute where people are living at home longer and or people are returning to home and then living at home. And it's a huge system-wide problem. So it's, again, not something you're doing that's a problem and you haven't done anything wrong. And I repeat that a lot because I had so much shame up through, 40, we'll say, when I really got a hold of myself and started working on that and understanding it and removing it. And so I want you to really hear me this morning when I say, like, this is not your fault, right? And it doesn't help you to spend time finding fault or spending time blaming others for where you're at today, right? I mean, chances are you're somewhere in your 30s, 40s, or older, and the only person responsible for you now is you. And so when we spend that time blaming and finding fault, we're really just wasting our precious energy. Now, again, hear me, I'm not saying don't spend time thinking about it, don't have awareness about it, and don't have feelings about it, because you should definitely, I do recommend all of those things, right? Which is literally the work I do with people, is helping people navigate that path so that they don't get sucked into those emotions, they don't get sucked into that blame that ultimately decreases their precious energy. And so we don't fully separate and or develop. And this can happen whether you live at home or you moved out at, 18 and you never talk to them again, right? Just to give you an extreme example. So you could be super close to them, or you could move out at 18 and never speak to your family or your, upbringing people ever again. It's this piece about you holding on to the beliefs that they told you about who you were and what you were capable of. And they didn't even have to be spoken. Mind-blowing. They don't even have to be spoken directly to you. They're the beliefs that you have developed in your own mind that you've gotten in relationship with them, right? So it may be something they never even said, but it's still there, dictating, running, leading, guiding your life. Okay, so, and that's the part where we have to do that inner work to really separate ourselves from those beliefs, those ways in viewing ourselves, to be able to fully cultivate what I will call a healthy, right, loving, honoring self-concept. And that's what I would say at the heart of why, in addition to that we get taught all these different systems and values and beliefs around the bigger picture of why we're here and how to live. Again, preparing for retirement versus preparing for right now and living your best life right now, right? We're preparing for retirement, which is the same kind of thing. Preparing for the end, right? Versus preparing for right now. Okay, so I've talked a little bit about how it impacts your life and a couple of other things there, right? I think one of the biggest things that has really stood out to me in my recent years of my own coaching work and my own inner work and my own studies is that our thoughts, right? Another way of thinking about your thoughts is like the things that we spend imagining and thinking about, right? Those things that we create, those various stories that we create in our mind, you actually are telling your body either to live to the fullest or to begin to shut down and prepare for the end. And this is what I really wanted to hone in on. And I'm going to talk about this all this coming week. So check out, my content and my posts and my lives this week for supporting information to really break down some of these parts, because it's a lot of really big concepts that are extremely important to understand. But it's this one part, you start to tell your body whether you want it to live or to die. And again, I'd be very clear with living and dying to be able to really draw out the contrast. And so when we hear the things like stress causes illness, or stress is incredibly harmful to the body, but we know that intellectually, and I can attest, I knew that intellectually. I mean, I was the person helping other people with their stress and telling them that very same sentiment. And yet, right, I was really struggling to manage my own stress, right? And so that is literally the difference between knowing something intellectually and knowing something such that it changes how you function, how you operate. And so when you come to really understand the impact of stress on the body, you then actually change your stress levels on your body. And so this little piece I found really, really important, and just a newer nuance for my own understanding in the most recent years, is that you're really telling your body, right, by the thoughts that you spend time with and the outlook that you have on your life, you're telling your body either, hey, I want you around and I'm going to take care of you to the best, or, hey, you're really not that important. And like, I'm gonna like take care of you so that you like function well for, sometime into like, I don't know, 70 or 80. In years past, I remember telling in close, friendship relationships, talking about life and death and those kind of big conversations, and voicing this notion of like, yeah, I'll be really good if I die sometime in my 80s. Again, how many of you have said that? How many of you have had that thought, right? You actually aren't excited about the idea of living past what age? I don't know for you. Me, it was sometime into my 80s. Like, yeah, take me peacefully in my sleep, I used to say. Whereas now, right, with these major shifts that I've had, again, from some very small tweaks in my thinking, I now look forward to living the longest life possible as of today. So, circling back, right, this impact, you have so much more power than you've ever been led to believe about your own health, right? Your own life, right? By the very thoughts, feelings, emotions, experiences that go on here in your imagination, in your narrative with yourself, that inner critic, all of those things that go on up here are having a very significant impact on your physical body, your health, and your entire life. So you have the power to change this. And that's what I want to spend the next few minutes really sharing is now that you have this understanding and you're like, eyes wide open, as I like to say, you're now conscious, right? And becoming more conscious if you weren't already. And if you were, you're becoming more conscious from our conversation here that you want to be consciously choosing to live. Why? Simply put, without getting into a bunch of details, feel free to drop into the chat, into the comments, your why. But it's just more fun. And it's easier, right? Essentially, it's easier to live a really healthy life. You ultimately will have the least amount of pain in your day-to-day living and in your experiences down the road. You'll have the least amount of pain when you're living fully invested in your life. Because you're going to take the very best care of yourself, which then is the path of least resistance. It's the path of the least pain. And as humans, we are hardwired to avoid pain. So most of us, unfortunately, end up making decisions that actually support more pain in our lives. And when you have more pain, everything is harder, right? Just like I was talking about before, stress is more, everything is harder. Okay, so what does life look like when you change your focus? And you can tell from the way that I'm going to talk about this, you'll be able to see the discrepancy. And again, I talk about it in very distinct terms so that you can see the discrepancy in your own life easier. So the big thing really that I just sort of summarized it to is when you're choosing to be fully invested in your life, you have both feet in this life, right? That post that I wrote this week, I love this energy healer I was working with. And she just, the very first session I went and met with her, again, it was like, I was at my wit's end and I was grasping for any resources I could find to help me, when I was at this critical point in my life, right around 38. And so I'm sitting with this woman who'd been referred to me by a very trusted friend. And I was very skeptical of the whole thing, energy healing. And I'm not now, just to clarify. It's what I embrace. And she just called me right out. I gave her a summary of what I was going through. And she just said, listen, it's very simple here. The reason you're struggling so much in your life is because you have 1 foot in and 1 foot out. You have 1 foot in living and you have 1 foot on dying, right? You have 1 foot here and 1 foot in the next. Whatever way it fits for your, belief system, I'm saying it in a couple of different ways. but that was the way that she spoke it to my heart and exactly the way I needed to hear it. And I was like, whoa. I had to actually take a pause. I saw her, and then there were several weeks in between because it was so jarring to have another human sit in front of me, hear my experience, and call out the thoughts that I had been having in my mind. But it changed. It shifted me. It was like the game-changing moment for me to be like, whoa, I need to make a decision because I don't want to continue to experience all of this pain because this sucks. Like hardcore. It was at that point sucking in every area of my life because it had invaded here, right? And so like everything in my life was being invaded by those thoughts. And that whole just outlook on life, like, ugh, that's how I felt about the outlook on my life. And some of you that know me may be surprised to hear that. And again, I share it very intentionally because we see all these very famous people, right, who ultimately do choose to take their life, whether it's intentionally, unintentionally choosing to take their life. And so I want to serve as just like your regular everyday person who has that same experience, who's also had like a lot of like, we'll just say a great life experience. And so this part around for myself, it was like I had to make a decision. I did not want my life to end. I didn't. In fact, I was like desperate, seeking all of these alternatives to figure out how to become fully invested in living. When she called me out on that, I was like square face, like boop, boop, right here. Hey, I have to make a decision. And that was the game changer for me when I made that decision. I don't want to die. I really do want to live. I have such a great life. I can see it. It's up ahead of me, right? And there's this cloud, right? This veil, this barrier keeping me from it. Turns out that barrier was me, which was one of the most freeing and liberating awarenesses to really, really understand. Not to know, not to intellectually know, but to know and feel empowered to be able to change. And that's when I went full in to the transformation work. I got my own coaches. I started, attending various things that I felt led to go to. Your experience will be unique for you and the people you feel called to pull into your life to support you, like me, right? That's why you're here watching me. And it started this journey and this determined side of me to become fully invested in living. Like all in, as the phrase goes. And to me, when you're all in, you're doing money, you're doing your time, you're doing your effort, your energy, your focus is on it, right? And that's where my focus went. I need to really understand what this means to be fully invested in my life, to have both feet in here. And that's not an easy thing. It's not like a simple thing. It's not an overnight thing. It's just not. Right? And if you're fooling yourself to say it is, and or you find yourself saying at this point in the message, like, oh yeah, I know this, which I highly doubt that you would be here this long to say, oh yeah, I know this, then I would offer to you, it's an intellectual experience for you, because otherwise you are living your best life, right? You are in the experience of living your life to the fullest. And so for me, it was as simple as making a decision, right? And you depending on your faith upbringing, I know for me, it was so clear from my upbringing. I had this like awareness and connection to my faith upbringing of you stop living one way, you stop believing one way, and you literally turn the other direction and go a new path. And I never looked back. I've had all kinds of ups and downs and everywhere and all the things, but I've always had my focus on, I want to be fully invested in living. And anytime I slip in my level of investment, I know I need more help. I know I need more support. And I have freed myself, liberated myself to be able to be willing to hire any support that I need to keep me fully invested in living. Because the in-between limbo, right? The hot or cold, the lukewarm thing is not for me. It is just not for me, and I hope it is not for you. And so if you're finding yourself this morning in that limbo, in that lukewarm waters, take the leap, right? Reorient yourself to being fully invested in living and hire whoever you need to help you get that support so that you can get realigned, because beauty comes when we're faced in the right direction. Beauty comes, right? They talk about that again. Beauty comes after the morning, right? Beauty is in the alignment with where we are destined, where our destiny lies, where our desires lie, where our belief in God lies, right? Our knowing of God. We come in alignment with that, and beautiful things that our imaginations, our minds cannot even fathom is up ahead of you. Okay. So you change your priorities, and I'll wrap this part up here. Bring us to a close by sharing you change your priorities. You just literally watch yourself change your priorities as you do this internal work. And again, when you're working with someone like me, we do it at your pace. We take things as they come, right? It's very like inspired, right? We're in conversation and you're sharing about a current struggle, a current barrier, whether it's a simple one like brushing your teeth. I'm using that very lightheartedly. Or it's something more significant, like I can't get myself to do the work I really want to be doing. I can't get myself out there like I really want to be. Then we address that barrier, right? We take on that level of shame. We take on that belief system that's keeping you from doing that thing. And so when you shift and you come into alignment, you find the freedom. You experience the freedom. And so when you're experiencing freedom, right, and that's what the work is all about, right? When you hear me talk about the inner work, it's about the work that needs to get done with your beliefs, your fears, your anxieties, your worries, your foundation, right? We need to get your foundation re-centered. And then all of those good things come. So things like good health. Decisions, your daily decisions that say, I want to be fully invested in living. I am fully invested in living, right? Then your daily decisions are aligning you. And so those things are a result of you getting into alignment in your internal life, in your internal world, in your mind, your body, your heart, your soul. And you start taking really good care of your body. You start loving your body with a genuine integrity. You come into better health. You wake up with energy. You wake up with excitement. You wake up with purpose to get out of bed. You experience greater levels of emotions, right? The variety of emotions. You experience passion, inspiration. You feel the feelings that are more uncomfortable to feel, like sadness and disappointment, but you have a way of handling them so that you don't get sucked into them. You make decisions with this mindset of, I'm doing the very best thing for me, even though it might feel hard, even though it might be uncomfortable. I am so committed to myself. I'm making the very best next decision for me from a place of genuine authenticness versus fear, right? And the avoidance of pain. It's really such a small shift, but it changes everything. You start to allow yourself to receive the things that you haven't been receiving, that you've been desiring, whether that's love, whether that's money, whether that's a new job, whether that's starting your own job and doing more of your own called to work. Whatever it is that you know you're meant for, you actually start allowing yourself to receive it. And you see yourself lining yourself up in such a way that you can have it, that you can experience it. You get, this is the other really important thing I want to make sure to include here is you get re-tapped in to your own intuition, right? And maybe you want to hear that in, I grew up hearing it as that still small voice. When I got to 38, I'll just use that as my reference point of my miserable. When I got to 38, one of my another big wake up for me was, I don't hear the still small voice anymore, right? Which for me meant, maybe different for you, but for me it meant, I don't hear God talking into my life anymore. And it was really actually a very terrifying thing, because I used to and had various significant time periods where I clearly heard God speaking into my life. And I felt very inspired and led at various periods of my life up till 38. But somewhere in that pre-38, I was like, wow, I don't hear that voice anymore. I don't have that sense of inner guidance, that sense of inner tuition. So if you are not hearing it, this is why. And it's still there, right? You haven't lost it. It's still there. It's, again, a matter of removing the veils or removing the barriers, removing all of the gook that has piled on top of you that is blocking your ability to hear. Okay, so when you're back in your alignment, you hear that still small voice and you feel empowered to take action on it, right? You actually cultivate room for it. You find yourself setting time apart for yourself to be able to hear it, for yourself to be able to dream, for yourself to be able to create, to put into action that which you feel inspired to do. All of these things are a result from you making a decision and doing the work to become fully invested in your life. The other huge piece that it's taken me some time to really see and understand, and people say this all the time, so again, really hear me, lean in and hear me so that you don't dismiss it easily, because I just would dismiss it. This concept of being concerned with what other people think of you, which I more will say advanced awareness that I've had, advanced way of thinking about it that my coach has helped me with, is being able to recognize that you're no longer fearful of the narrative that other people may or may not have about you. And so you release the reins on trying to control the narrative that people have or don't have about you. And so it's things like you're more open with what's really going on with you. You're not holding on. You're not secretive. You're not trying to hide certain things from certain people. And again, I'm not saying you should shout from the rooftops all your problems. Goodness, no, please don't do that. But what I am saying is when we're still in hiding, right? And we're still in the concern of what other people may or may not think about us, we're trying to control what the narrative is, right? We're trying to control the narrative that they're creating in their mind, which is really a serious expense of your energy. But let me tell you, we all do it. And so that shifts in a radical way that you've never experienced before until you've done it, where you have just this radical falling away of, I actually care way less than I've ever cared about what so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so may or may not think about me, which looks like you're speaking your truth in more and more and more situations. You are choosing to leave situations that you have known are not good for you. You're choosing to take the next step, the next leap into other areas of life that you know are meant for you, right? And so when you're still concerned and you're trying to control the narrative, you don't do those things. You stay in those things. You don't take the leaps. You don't take the risk. You don't put yourself out there. All because we're trying to hold on to this persona, this version of who we are, which I can happily tell you after years of doing that, it is so much wasted energy. And I say that very intentionally because I don't think anything is a waste. All things are used for good. All things become a use for good. And I say that very intentionally wasted because if you find yourself in this place, I want you to hear, you can literally take all of that energy that you're using to hide yourself and or put on the happy mask when you go out into public, right? Or around those certain people. And you can take all of that amazing energy of who you are and channel it towards what you want and towards you becoming this beautiful version of you, allowing that beautiful version of you to truly contribute in the way that you're meant to, and to show up in the world in the most inspiring and beautiful way that literally other people look at you and they're like, what has happened with you? I want what you have. Tell me what you're doing because I need it, right? That's literally the most powerful way to change the world, is simply by you becoming the best version of you and then showing up in the world that way. It's mind-blowing that it's actually that simple. And again, it's not easy, right? Because it takes like a lot to get in there and really readjust ourselves, which is why people hire me, right? Again, it's like why you need this level of support. Because let me tell you, over the coaches that I have had, there have been a hot many moments where I have fought tooth and nail with what they were presenting to me. So you need someone who's able to hold your resistance to what you need to see about yourself. Okay. So again, anything I share with you about my personal experience is really in service of you, to be able for you to see what I've experienced and to be able to ask yourself, how can I relate to this? How can I see myself in what Sarah is describing about her own experience? And my experience has been the experience of all of the clients I have worked with now in the coaching space. And so many of the experiences that I have had in the hundreds of people I've had the opportunity to work with in the 25 years that I have been helping people. So, you, as a result of choosing to become fully invested in life, you're able to go through life again in this whole new way. And it's really some very simple tweaks, right? I used to talk about it like making these big leaps. But what I've learned and gotten more honed and aware of is it's actually these like 2 millimeter, as you may have heard some other people talk about, these very small tweaks, right? So the tweak from looking at your life like, wow, what would it look like for me to embrace living a very long, happy, fulfilling life? Excuse me, I feel like I have like a hidden burp waiting that I will wait to have happen till after I get off with you. Versus preparing to die, right? And all of the ways that we do that, the goals that we set, the pressure we put on ourselves to achieve, all in this like, I have to prepare for the worst, I have to make sure I have enough because I never know what's going to happen. And this is like the path, right? And that's really like not the way any human desires to live. And it's not the way you were designed, like literally designed to live. And that's why you have so much inner turmoil within you, is because your most authentic, highest version, genuine version of yourself, the God that is within you, desires to live. That's the utmost of your essence, is this desire to live your very best life, to contribute in the very best way, right? And so you're in this inner conflict because you have both of those elements going on within you. This desire to live and this prepared conditioning, training to die, to prepare for what might happen and all the angst and the worry and the fear. So I implore you, I offer you, I celebrate you to allow that version of you to come forth. It is, like I said, I would have never been able to predict where I am now prior to doing the work, right? What I tell people is conjure up the very best vision that you can, right? Because it's limited to what you can do here right now with where you're at. Conjure up the very best version of you and then multiply it times like an infinite amount, but just start with like multiply it times like 5, right? And that is what awaits you on the other side of doing this work. So I work with people one-on-one for a period of 6 months. We meet just like this not just like this. this is over Facebook. I meet with people over Zoom where I have conversations, audible conversations, and it's very tailor-made to exactly where you're at with exactly where you want to go in mind. And I think about it like I'm walking beside you, right? Because of technology, which is like incredibly amazing. I'm literally able to be in your back pocket or your purse or wherever you hold your phone. And I'm walking beside you through life, right? Through this like period, this window that we get to do life together. And I'm providing the guidance, the way to retrain your mind, the conditioning, right? And I'm a coach, I'm an advisor, I'm a confidant, I'm all of this like type of person, this essential person to help you make that transformation, to help you get from where you are to where you desire to be, and to be able to see yourself in a genuine, authentic way. And as you start to do that, your whole life starts to shift. And it happens in a much easier way than you think it would. I dreaded it for a hot minute before I hit my point at 38 where I was like, oh, I got to invest and like seriously get over here or else there was just no other option for me. So allowing yourself to be able to embrace that, it's possible for you, right? That's really my heartfelt ending to our time together is embrace the possibility. It's so, so possible for you. And it's much easier than you think it will be. And instead of avoiding it, or using things like the common, reasons that people don't do this work is, for sure, number one, I don't have the money. And for sure, number two, I don't know where I'll find the time. And here's what I tell people, like, can you really afford not to do it, right? Because if you think about like all of your bills that are going to come as a result of your life over the next 40 years, living this hard way, painful way, it's going to be a F-ton more money than any amount of money I will ever charge. And, is it worth it, right? Is it really worth it to you to live that way? For me, again, I did put it off because it terrified me. This thing called inner work, this thing called transformation, it felt so hard. But once I actually decided and shifted, I'll also tell you this, in your decision of hiring people, right, the healthier you get, the healthier you view yourself, the healthier you will choose people to help you. I started out where I started out, and I have elevated and elevated and elevated and elevated to where now the work feels effortless. I mean, it's still work, right? Like I still have uncomfortable feelings. I still have sad days. I still have hard moments. I still have moments of like fear. But the work, the inner work, right? When I'm sitting with my coach or I'm sitting with myself each morning, the work I do internally on my own, it feels so much more effortless. It feels fun. It feels like a discovery process rather than the way it first started out. And for sure, all of the anticipation that I built up that it was going to be like so hard, right? And again, like given my background, take that into account. So I just want you to hear that, right? For all of you listening, it's really a lot more easy, and it's incredibly easier when you're doing it with someone who really knows what they're doing. So, as always, you guys, thank you so much for spending time with me. And I can't wait to see how this message impacts your life, impacts your heart, impacts the thoughts in your mind and the way that you see yourself and the hope that you have for the future. Thank you so much for spending time with me, and feel free. I'd love to hear, your thoughts, your insights. Shoot me a private message and drop emojis, all of the things to support the message getting out there to the most people, because the more people who experience their own transformation, the better place we all have to live. Between now and when I see you next, go do the thing you most want to do today. And I'll see you here next week, same time, same place.